The global projection of American power rests on the image of an unstoppable military machine. For decades, the United States has relied on rapid, high-tech interventions to achieve swift geopolitical results. The 1991 Persian Gulf War cemented this confidence. Because the technological gap between the coalition and the Iraqi army was so vast, the combat felt virtual. Defenses were dismantled from the air before ground forces ever saw a significant threat. In 2003, the capture of Baghdad seemed to confirm that heavy air power and rapid armor could topple any regime with minimal effort. It convinced planners that overwhelming force at the start of a conflict was a guaranteed path to victory. This history of easy, low-casualty victories created a blind spot. It allowed the United States to build a military structure that excels in short, asymmetrical strikes, but fails in the prolonged, resource-heavy wars of the past. Every military operates on a cost pyramid, an economic map of its resources. At the base are infantry soldiers, the most numerous and least expensive to field. Above them sit tanks, then naval ships, and finally the highly expensive aircraft at the very top. The United States has inverted this structure. Its strategy relies almost entirely on hyper-expensive air and naval platforms, leaving its actual ground forces balancing precariously on a shrinking foundation of infantry. Replacing a single modern fighter jet requires years of production and an immense concentration of industrial energy. In a war of attrition, these are assets that cannot be easily replenished once they are lost. If the U.S. enters a conflict with Iran to secure the Strait of Hormuz, it faces an organized regional power rather than a weak insurgency. Iran's military is built to absorb damage and force its opponents into a long, grinding stalemate. The U.S. math breaks down immediately. In a sustained conflict, the military cannot afford to lose multi-million-dollar aircraft to perform roles that should be handled by cheap, plentiful infantry. Bombs and missiles can destroy infrastructure, but they cannot hold territory. To secure a region as vast as Iran, soldiers must physically occupy the ground. To win this war, the United States is forced to abandon its preference for air power and deploy ground troops as its primary fighting force. This shifts the conflict into a grueling, manpower-intensive theater. Iran's main objective is the destruction of CENTCOM, or Central Command. CENTCOM is the United States military headquarters responsible for overseeing all American operations across the Middle East and Central Asia. If CENTCOM is dismantled, Iran removes the primary barrier to regional dominance. Neighboring Gulf states would be forced to shift their allegiance to Tehran, effectively turning Iran into the new regional hegemon. By launching a ground invasion, the U.S. enters the environment it is least prepared to sustain. It enters a landscape where its high-tech advantages are neutralized by the sheer scale of the terrain and the number of opposing forces. Understanding the outcome of this war requires mapping the conflicting motivations of the major players. While the U.S. focuses on destroying Iran, its own regional partners have objectives that do not align with American interests. Saudi Arabia seeks the removal of the Iranian threat, but they also benefit from a weakened United States. An America that is exhausted by war and forced to withdraw would leave Saudi Arabia unwatched and free to dominate regional trade and oil. Israel's strategy follows a similar path. While they want the Iranian military dismantled, their long-term goal is to emerge as the sole superpower in the Middle East. If a war destroys both Iran and the American CENTCOM infrastructure, that path becomes clear. This creates a situation where America's closest allies are incentivized to see the American military presence in the region significantly degraded. These regional powers will likely work to prolong the conflict. By dragging out the war, they force the United States into a multi-year ground invasion that drains its treasury and breaks its political resolve. The United States is entering a theater where its allies are quietly engineering a scenario that ensures an American retreat from the Middle East. As the conventional ground war drags on, the economic and human costs begin to mount, causing visible strain within the American military command. In this state of desperation, planners might consider the ultimate weapon. If the ground war is failing, why wouldn't the U.S. or Israel use nuclear strikes to force an immediate end to the conflict? This is governed by the escalation ladder, a framework used to map military responses from minor skirmishes to total nuclear war. Each step up requires a solid foundation of domestic public opinion and high troop morale, factors that are impossible to maintain during a nuclear exchange. Furthermore, using a nuclear weapon risks an uncontrollable response from the adversary. It pushes enemy morale to a point where they may retaliate with similar catastrophic force, leading to a conflict that no one can manage or survive. Because the nuclear option is strategically and politically unusable, the U.S. remains trapped in a conventional war of attrition. It is a fight that its top-heavy military structure simply cannot win over the long term. In this hypothetical timeline, the weight of constant casualties and astronomical debt eventually becomes too heavy to carry. A sustained, losing war breaks the American public's willingness to engage in foreign conflicts. The resulting political pressure makes any future intervention in the region impossible. As an exhausted America withdraws its remaining forces, a massive power vacuum opens across the Middle East. With Iran defeated and the U.S. gone, Israel is left to dominate the region. The failure is not a matter of weapon quality. Instead, the American position collapses because its military structure was built for short interventions, not the complex, multiplayer grind of a regional war. An invasion of Iran triggers the end of American influence in the Middle East. As the sun sets on this era, the United States withdraws, leaving the region to those who engineered its departure.